Hello, everyone. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late today. I was in a meeting downtown and the road is closed and I got stuck in traffic trying to get to my computer somewhere where I can speak to you. We're doing another veranda session today. This is the last session, session 12 of MOOC 7. The topic is uh, cryptocurrencies and blockchain and digital currency and the developing world. Small number of questions on that topic, so I'll answer those. But I also wanted to use this as an opportunity to highlight a few points about the overall academic program and answer any questions that anyone might have about the academic program as a whole. So I am going to jump right into the questions to see, let's get through those, and then we'll see what else we want to talk about in this last session. First questions. Aren't mobile payment services competitors for Bitcoin? The lecture mentions M-Pesa in Kenya and Alipay and WeChat in China, but there are plenty of other mobile payment systems worldwide, some of them provided by well-known big companies like Apple Pay, Android Pay, Amazon Pay, etc. Aren't those kinds of services competitors which threaten Bitcoin adoption, at least for domestic transactions? Furthermore, even though Bitcoin could be a fast and cheap bridge for remittances, those same mobile services could silently embed it for cross-border transfers, so the final user would never realize that by paying with the mobile app, they were leveraging the Bitcoin network. Then why should people feel the need to use Bitcoin as a payment system directly and bother with wallets, secure storage, purchase with exchanges, etc., instead of downloading and using some ready and more user-friendly mobile app? This is a great multi-part question. I agree with many of the points in the question. Let me go through the easy ones. Are these services competitors that threaten Bitcoin adoption, at least for domestic retail transactions? Absolutely. The biggest challenges that Bitcoin will be for domestic retail transactions because most countries have a reasonably functioning payment system of some type. And certain countries, some developed countries, but also some developing countries like China and Kenya, and China has an amazing mobile payment systems, actually have better than functioning. They have very interesting, integrated, scaled payment systems that also integrate all types of other things, messaging, chat, etc., etc. These are absolutely competitors for B2C retail payments. And they might even be reasons that Bitcoin doesn't have a role in B2C retail payments in that in those markets. So I do not consider it an inevitability that we will be using Bitcoin to buy our jeans and buy our coffee. As it is today in a developed country, I do not think it's a better user experience. As much as I'm a obvious fan of cryptocurrencies, I do not use Bitcoin except for very unusual circumstances. When I go buy my drink at a bar or buy a pair of shoes at the mall, I'm generally using cash or a credit card. That's the reality. I use it in some circumstances once in a while, but not commonly. And I wouldn't expect the average consumer, for the utility it provides today for B2C payments, or C2B payments, I suppose, retail payments, is going to go through all of the steps for adopting it as a payment system. Now, I think remittances are a little different than B2C payments for retail payments. For remittances, there's a definite cost advantage. If you have a person on the other side of the remittance that is Bitcoin aware and you're Bitcoin aware, it can work. So, and it's much cheaper and faster. Even with the congestion on blocks, it's also faster. So I think that's not as commodified or as well developed as B2C payments. And then to the question of, well, will it just get embedded in the background, that people use it, companies use it to transmit and settle across country lines, but the consumer never knows that it's Bitcoin? Yes, I don't think that's a bad thing, by the way. I don't think the objective or anyone's objective necessarily is that Bitcoin should have, that people should have to worry about keeping a wallet secure, right? Like, that's not a consumer benefit, that's a consumer negative. I understand for some people, having full control of your money in something you control is a benefit, but for most people, having full control, what does that mean? No counterparty risk to a bank, or maybe more indirectly to government, in exchange for the opportunity of, if you mess up something, you lose all your money. It's a trade-off most people won't take. You'd have to be fairly technically sophisticated and confident to make that trade-off. Most people will not make it. So Bitcoin working in the background to enable services where the consumer doesn't necessarily have to work through Bitcoin, I think that's a perfectly logical, great, and good outcome. In fact, I use a service for US Euro bank transfers that does exactly that for some of our operations of the university, where it pulls out of bank accounts, it then converts to Bitcoin, uses Bitcoin for the international piece, and then goes back in using the domestic payment system. It works great. I am well aware that it is using Bitcoin under the hood, but I don't personally have to take any particular interest while I'm doing that transaction in any of the mechanics of Bitcoin. So I see that as definitely something that's going to happen. And I don't even, the question is worded as if it's a slight negative. I don't think it's a negative. I think it's at worst neutral, and it might even be a positive. One good test that we're getting away from technical specifications and to things people will actually use is if you can describe some type of functionality and usage case without getting into a bunch of technical details. So nobody thinks to themselves, I would like to use TCP/IP today, right? Nobody thinks to themselves, I would like to use local edge caching. Nobody thinks to themselves, what a great day to use a content delivery network. What people think to themselves is the new episode of The Americans is out, and I would like to watch it on Netflix or Showtime. Americans is Stars. The new episode of Homeland's out, and I want to watch it on Showtime, right? And I want to stream it to my computer, and 17 different technologies are going to make it viable for that to stream to my computer, of which I, the consumer, don't need to know or care about any of them. You only get mass adoption, mass consumer adoption, if that happens. You will not get mass consumer adoption if that does not happen. It's also the case, this is what the first half of every time we teach open financial systems is this question of, is Bitcoin going to be a payment network or a settlement network? And one perfectly valid theory is that it is going to be a settlement network in the same way that the current financial system does not, you do not do retail payments on the financial backbone. Why? Because the financial backbone, well, today you don't have access to it as a consumer, but even if you did, it's irreversible. You don't get any protection if you make a mistake. So if I decide to use Fedwire and send money to some party, and then I realize, I shouldn't have sent them $1,000. I decided I didn't like the share I bought, and that party's not going to give me my money back. Fedwire is not going to get involved in my dispute with the other party. That's what credit card companies are from, that are built a layer above. You and the merchant connect through the credit card company and a bunch of other parties. Ultimately, the settlement happens with Fedwire using between the banks of the merchants and the customers, but all of the fancy features are happening a layer above. And I think that's something that will be a possible outcome, that Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency will provide a mechanism, an open, there's one state of the world that says Bitcoin is an open, cross-border, programmable settlement system. It'll be primarily used inside other systems. It will help build other systems that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. And except for more technical consumers aren't going to use it directly. Now, there is a nuance, and I think this is an important nuance, and it has to do with permissionlessness. The web is powerful even if most people use Facebook and Twitter and Google and Tumblr and Instagram and Snapchat. Why am I saying all these words? These are all closed platforms, right? The average person communicates on the web using a closed platform. However, the fact that anyone can connect a server to the internet and publish directly, run any type of service directly, provides a safety valve, first of all. It provides a safety valve for uncensored speech. It provides a safety valve for competitive behavior. It allows people to provide services that if you had to go through, back in the old days, AOL to get your service on the internet, CompuServe. There might be services that say, no, we don't want to have your service on the internet. Well, you can still go and put it on the internet anyway. And it keeps the major players in check. And this is an important aspect, that even if it ends up being embedded in other systems, the fact remains that people still can use it directly if they want. All right, next question. Cryptocurrencies and corrupt governments. Many sub-Saharan African countries are corrupt according to Transparency International Corruption Index. Do you think, A, corrupt governments will frustrate or ban cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, whose underlying principle is decentralization, which is a threat in terms of exposure and accountability? 2, in case Bitcoin successfully penetrates Africa, could corrupt governments A, intentionally execute a 51% attack using state resources for financial gain, B, use it for money laundering because of anonymity? On the first one, I'm not sure how much exposure and accountability it's going to provide unless they first go and adopt it, right? So, for it to provide some more exposure than the normal payment system, some government would have to say, I'm going to make my payments using Bitcoin, and then everyone can see, excuse me, everyone can see who I'm making payments to and so on. But what I don't think is going to happen is a government that is corrupt and doesn't want to be transparent will decide to use a cryptocurrency to be transparent and then try and ban the cryptocurrency in order to stop being transparent. The much easier solution is to not do anything, continue doing business in the same way they're doing business now, and continue whatever type of non-transparent procedures they're using now. I mean, that seems like a much easier option than getting into a whole fight with a decentralized cryptocurrency, which is not necessarily a hugely winnable fight. Second, could I imagine a sub-Saharan African government executing a 51% attack on a cryptocurrency? Look, I don't want to say never. I don't want to say it can't happen. All types of strange things have happened in world history, including in the last few years. But I wouldn't expect that if you're going to expect a governmental 51% attack against a cryptocurrency, my first guess of who might execute such an attack is probably not like, I don't know, Mali, right? That wouldn't be my immediate guess. Primarily, and this is a very practical response, they have much bigger problems to worry about than disrupting the cryptocurrency network, right? If you told me, like, is there some scenarios I could imagine a major world power who can easily afford or more easily afford the mining power and has the data centers and the technical abilities to do it, yeah, it's easier to imagine. It's harder to imagine that one of these less developed countries that have more limited computing infrastructure in general is going to go then dedicate a significant portion of the government budget to making a bet that they'll pull off what exactly? I know it says for financial gain, but a 51% attack by a nation state to disrupt the network is at least conceivable. A 51% attack for financial gain is very hard to imagine how that works, right? The only way you can financially gain from a 51% attack is if you manage to double spend. But how are you going to manage to double spend these large quantities? I mean, if you go spend a few $100 million to disrupt the Bitcoin network, what are you going to pay for? That's a few $100 million and is non-refundable. You've taken it and no one's going to get it back. What are you going to go buy? If you buy an apartment building, let's say, I'm very smart. I'm going to buy this apartment building across the street from me and it's $50 million and I'm going to pay them in Bitcoin and then it's a 51% attack and take my Bitcoins back. Well, okay. I'll just take you to court, show this, and the court will hand them back the building. Like 51 double spend attacks are only good if you can take the product and run away with it. Right? You trick the merchant thinks they've gotten paid, you take the product and you run away with it. Well, there are not that many products. Any products? Are there even any products that you can run away with that you would also pay several $100 million for? That, by the way, someone's going to accept Bitcoin for, even if there was such a product. So I don't think financial gain is going to be the motivator, because I don't think you can actually do it. So someone who's going to disrupt cryptocurrency with a 51% attack and spend significant time and resources against it, and no, maybe if you got into that type of game, some other country would try and defend it. Would be someone that is feeling some type of existential threat to their monetary system from Bitcoin. I mean, it's the only reason I can imagine someone doing it. And if that country is a major power, that major power might have strategic competitors, and those strategic competitors might not want them to be able to get out of their mess. So maybe they throw hashing power at the problem too, in which case you're going to get an awful lot of hashing power thrown at the cryptocurrency. The second piece, use it for money laundering because of anonymity. Bitcoin is not particularly hugely anonymous. We'll see with Zcash. But remember, to the degree that any cryptocurrency is anonymous, it is anonymous at large amounts, so long as you don't then thereafter spend the money. If I am the Sultan of the Republic of Antonis and I ask people to pay their taxes not to me, but to my not to the government, but to my secret Bitcoin or Ethereum or Zcash address, and then I don't move it, yes, it's true. I can stash up a lot of money there, though someone's probably going to figure out that that's mine. But let's say they don't. Let's say I go and take bribes. They say, look, don't give me cash. Don't wire me the money. Don't give me a car. Don't give me diamonds. Just send some Bitcoin to this address. Well, that's good. So now this is address. And so long as I don't touch that address, it might be hard to trace to me. Okay. Then I go buy my house in Kensington and I pay with Bitcoin, which is going to send up red flags everywhere. At that point, you'll see the Bitcoin moving. Someone will exchange a house for Bitcoin or a Ferrari or a fur coat or whatever it is I want, private jet. And if I am going to use it, or my family is going to use it, or anyone associated with me is going to use it, you then have created a very nice money trail for someone to follow back on where that came from. The most anonymous form of payment remains cash, good old US dollars. Cash, once it has been transferred, it doesn't keep a history with it. I mean, of course, barring some edge cases where you're getting marked bills or something, it doesn't keep a history with it. And so it's only risky once. After that, there's nothing for people to trace. So I don't worry too much about Bitcoin opening up huge new channels for corrupt governments to be corrupt. Governments have been corrupt for many, many thousands of years. There are hundreds of corrupt, or dozens at least, of severely corrupt countries in the world. All of the banking or regulatory agencies continue to say that their biggest risk in terms of corruption remains US dollars and then euros. So I'm not too worried about that. Okay, next question. BTC to M-Pesa services. Hello, Antonis. Bitwala, a company based in Berlin, Germany, announced a platform to send Bitcoin to M-Pesa in Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda, and Tanzania. The service allows 20 currencies, makes separate transfers to over 35 countries in Europe, and wires any currency to any bank account in the world with the best currency rate at a minimum cost. That is, in theory, because their terms and conditions make no warranty against availability or even the validity of the information presented on their website. How can Nigerian, Kenyan, etc. trust operations in Bitcoins in such terms of service? Even if Western Union is expensive with fees, at least consumers have a security. Under Bitwala's conditions, there's no security at all. Could be a key factor to use Western Union. Some of this might be true, some of this might not actually be accurate. I'm sure there is, if you go read most providers' terms and conditions that are written by lawyers, they are busy disclaiming responsibility for all types of things, including errors or omissions on their website, including inaccurate information. I've read about some horror cases in the UK where incorrect wires have gone for large amounts of money and everyone agrees it was a mistake and it went to the wrong place and it's not the wire that was meant to happen. And the banks kind of throw their hands up in there and say, like, well, too bad, sucks to be you. So the amount of protection one has in day-to-day activities as written in the terms and conditions of a document, which might be different from what a judge might say if you take him to court, by the way, it's probably less than you think, to be honest, because the job of a good legal counsel in that scenario is to make the terms and conditions extremely aggressively in favor of the company making them. And then if you assume that these services are going to be regulated as money transmitters, which they surely will be, realistically, they're all going to end up with a very similar regulatory regime in terms of what types of protections they have to give or not give, as the case may be, to consumers. The second part to this question, which says, to run the system, you need a mobile network. In Kenya, it's Safaricom. Another company is trying to run the same business with Bitwala for years, but called BitPesa. They cannot because Safaricom canceled the mobile services for money for operators. Seems like no entity is currently licensed to offer money remittance services and products in Kenya using virtual currency such as Bitcoin. Without internet regulations, licenses, the implementation of Bitcoin in Africa could take many, many years. Yes, there's opportunity in Africa developing countries with Bitcoins, but there are also opportunities with shoes 50 years ago, and maybe not everyone has shoes yet. Okay. Yes, BitPesa started off very ambitious. They ran into some difficulties with Safaricom. They're still going as a company. I think they're focusing a little bit more on Asia-Africa remittances right now. It is true you will have monopolist vendors or semi-monopolists or industry, either directly or indirectly through government lobbying, may very well try to prevent new entrants. This is a fact of life. It is a fact of life in many industries. It happens. It will happen here. I remember when the telecom companies were trying to make voice over IP more or less illegal in the United States. And it can certainly delay things. And it is certainly the case that countries that have very aggressive regulatory environment and don't push for open access and what have you, get services later than other countries and develop more slowly and become less wealthy and become less innovative. So I think this is true. This is going to happen. And in theory, and I hope it happens, some developing country could maybe use some of these new technologies to get a leg ahead. In practice, the major hubs for cryptocurrency activity tend to be very wealthy cities. That's the reality. So there's some activities in some developing countries, but if I wanted to find a concentration of people working on cryptocurrency or blockchain activities, I'd probably be looking at a Silicon Valley or New York or Dublin or London or Singapore. I mean, there's some concentration in the Philippines. There's some countries running individual trials of individual protocols. But it's not as if the developing world as a whole has jumped into all of this and has gone full speed ahead. A great example of a country that was not the wealthiest that used new technology to upgrade its infrastructure substantially is Estonia. Estonia has a very strong e-government initiative. They use cryptographic signatures to allow you to authenticate yourself for all types of governmental services online. Estonia was not a big player on the governmental technology scene or the offshore company scene 10, 15 years ago. It was post communism, relatively poor, and just not a big player. And they invested very aggressively in adopting new technology across their government. And now they are one of the active new entrants and allow you to do all types of things, like, get in offshore Estonian citizenship and then be able to transact all type of Estonia as a venue activity through their online services. And it's an example of what can happen if you're willing to say, I'm going to build or rebuild my systems on modern technology and take advantage of that and use that to get ahead. And they did it, and they succeeded. But most countries will not do it. Sometimes, I'll leave you with this one example. Sometimes these new ideas will take hold because people will think they're unimportant. It's almost a myth, but I've heard it from one of the founders of the BPO industry in India. India used to have the license Raj in the 80s and 90s. What was the license Raj? They had a semi-planned economy, and so the license Raj would say, like, the auto companies this year should make 532,000 cars, and if they make less, they're in trouble. But if they also work harder or more productive or think of a new thing and make 535,000 cars, they're also in trouble and they're going to get fined. It's weird. This did not do wonders for the productivity of the Indian economy. And yet, that same country that was, relatively low productivity growth during that period, built a very dynamic IT and business process outsourcing sector. And you say, well, why was that the case? And the reason was, in 1985 and in 1993 and probably 1995, nobody in India thought IT or business process outsourcing was particularly important, large, meaningful, or anything anyone should care about. So nobody bothered to put in place the regulations and the license Raj and the restrictions on these areas. And the entrepreneurs that jumped on this topic and built up these companies ended up building a very valuable sector of the Indian economy before anyone noticed that they were doing it. And then once they were built up, they're like, oh wow, this is good. Let's not kill it. So the best thing is if a government is supportive. Sometimes the second best thing is a government doesn't realize your sector exists and is just off doing other things, and you can kind of go along your business and then create what you're going to create, and then they discover what it is, and by then it's already established and it's clear that it's valuable. The worst thing is if the government's actively opposing you, obviously, and that can delay things. So those were the questions that came in advance. Since I'm about 15 minutes in this section, I want to switch to talk a little bit about the course. Then I'm going to give George an opportunity to tell us a little bit, and I can share for him about the final examinations and so on. So, as you know, this is the first course of the Masters in Digital Currency at the University of Nicosia. It's in a slightly different format than the rest of the than the rest of the courses in that the groups tend to be bigger, so we do the online sessions differently. In some of the other courses, we actually get everyone on video and talk together. We do them using Skype for Business. We now have, I believe, close to 100 students who have enrolled in the program. We had the first graduates in June of 2016. We'll have a new set of graduates in June of 2017. It remains the most developed program of its type in the world. It remains the only full degree program of its type in the world. There are some concentrations popping up here or there, but it's the only full degree program. It is certainly the one that has had the most experience teaching these topics, with great faculty from around the world. And most industry rankings say that the University of Nicosia does have the #1 teaching, educational, academic initiative in this topic area in the world. And there's some pretty stiff competition there. Many of the top Ivy League schools in the world are also involved in this area. And I still think we have the most advanced and developed program. Now, we are now about a year after people are graduating. We get to see what they're doing. Everyone, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, George, everyone is employed. Everyone is doing something related to the industry. Some of them are have taken jobs at firms in the industry. Some of them have started their own startups in their industry. 1 or 2 are in academia. So everyone has been able to leverage, obviously, their passion for the topic area and the course and the content in the course and some of the connections and friendships they've made in the course, and have continued into this exciting area. The program as it's structured now has 2 pathways, one that is more business managerial oriented. This would be good for an executive who is working in a company involved in the space, and one that is more technically oriented for someone who might be doing some software development as well. We are also submitting for accreditation this year a concentration of our computer science program that is much more technically oriented, purely developer oriented program in blockchain technologies. We will know later this year if it's approved for accreditation, and we can offer that as well. So depending on what your orientation is, if you're more business managerial oriented or if you're more technical oriented, there is a appropriate pathway for you. George posted earlier a video of one of our alums, Joseph. He spoke in our session last time and was able to describe what he got out of the program, what he's doing now. He's actually the chief medical officer of a blockchain startup in the pharmaceutical industry. He was a surgeon before he did the program. So it is an absolutely fascinating mix of people who have been signing up for the program. Most of them in their 20s and 30s, many of them with other degrees and or careers from a very wide range of backgrounds. So you end up having a lot of cross-pollination in the courses of people with different backgrounds, but all with a passion for this topic, who believe that this is going to be a big topic area. Regardless of whether you attend our program or not, I think developing skills in this area is more or less a personal full employment act. The amount of interest in this area relative to the number of people who know anything about it is hugely out of balance. There will be demand not just from quote unquote Bitcoin blockchain startups. There's going to be demand across the board from law firms, accounting firms, central banks, regulators, tax authorities, shipping companies, logistic companies, Internet of Things companies, industrial companies, for how blockchain or digital currency will fit into their operations. And so whether you have a technical background or a managerial background, people who know this topic well are going to have a very interesting set of job opportunities, I believe, available to them, and be able to work on some cutting edge topics, be able to work on topics that within organizations are getting more senior manager attention than other topics. And so if you're either earlier in your career or considering career shift, it's a very promising area. The son of our CFO has done not just the master's in digital currency, he's going to be doing a PhD in this topic. I mean, there are people deeply involved in this area are encouraging their family members to become involved in this area. So I think it's a very interesting time. It's like developing capabilities on internet-related topics in the early to mid 90s. I think there's a lot of action coming forward over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. A couple of other topics. I am going to be in Salt Lake City next week. I am speaking at the ASU GSV conference, which is the leading educational technology conference, and I'm speaking on a panel on blockchain in education. So if any of you happen to be at the conference, please look me up. Professor Yaglis, who is the scientific coordinator of the program, will be at Consensus in New York later this month. I will be there too, as will Professor Luga. Professor Yaglis is chairing the academic panel at Consensus, and there will be other folks from academia from many top universities. And so if you're at Consensus, please come see the panel, A. If you're at Consensus, please also come find any of us, B, to catch up. There will be 3 of us from the University of Nicosia there. Every time I've gone to Consensus, I have met several students from our classes, and so it will be nice to see some of you in person. Later that week, we will be holding a meetup for people who are students or alums in the course. We have opened a small office in downtown Manhattan in West Soho. That's going to support, among other things, our Bitcoin and blockchain initiatives. So we will be there to, in a way, celebrate the opening of the office. It just opened a couple months ago, and we need to go on there and put our logos on the wall and get filing cabinets and all those types of things. We're still really in setup stage. So that's one of the things we'll be doing this month there. So we will host a afternoon, I think it's at 4:30 to 6:30, meetup for everyone who can make it to the Manhattan area. And whoever is available afterwards, we'll go out in Soho, and I'm buying drinks. And since I lived in Soho for the last 12 years before I moved to Cyprus, I am well qualified to lead that part of the evening. So I hope to see some of you in person, if not at Consensus, at that event. In the group today, but also with us every single day, is Irini Patrikios. She leads our admissions team for the program. She is extremely friendly, extremely helpful, and extremely knowledgeable about how the program works. If anyone has any questions about the program or anything else, please shoot her an email, chat her, give her a call. She is here to help, and she leads the team that helps admission students. We have our final examination next weekend. It is opening on the 12th for 72 hours. I encourage you to do the examination so that you can complete the course, so that you can get your academic certificate. We have the highest completion rate of any MOOC I have ever heard of anywhere in the world. We run in the mid-20s. I'd love to get even higher. It's an indication of the passion that everyone that comes into this course has for this topic area. And so If you can swing it, please do try and do the examination, and please go through. We have an updated certificate process. We have one of our team members is a computer scientist, PhD in software developer, and he has been rebuilding our certificate process. We were the first by years to put academic certificate in the blockchain, and we are going to have a very interested, more automated system going forward, more automated, verifiable system going forward, and it's going to be pretty exciting. I think you guys will be the first ones to get your certificates in this done with this new system. So it's always exciting to be a part of history. You will still be, at this stage, only the 7th class in world history to have their academic certificates on the blockchain, and it is not going to be that way for long. I think in 2 or 3 years there will be hundreds of courses that use the blockchain for academic certificates, but if you go today, you'll still be 7th. There was a good question in the comments. I'll read it out loud. Someone mentions that they're not a mathematician or computer scientist. They find themselves grappling with some of the concepts, hashing, cryptography, etc. How can they succeed in the master's program? This is very, very common. I would say only 15 to 20% of the students in the master's program have a computer science background. You would obviously not take the computer science track of the master's program. Most of the courses are managerial courses. If you don't take that track, it is important to understand some general concepts about Bitcoin, and the team will be here to help. We have much smaller groups in these courses, but a lot of them can be thought of as a managerial or fintech or regulatory course where a mathematical cryptographic background is definitely not required. Someone asked when you should finish the quizzes. You should finish the quizzes before starting the final exam. I think I have covered the topics I was supposed to cover. George, did I miss anything? Okay, if anyone has any last questions, we have about a minute. I'll look out for them. So keep an eye out for the next minute or so. Someone asked, I'm interested in enrolling in the managerial part of the master. How do I proceed? You proceed by getting in touch with Irene. Irene Patricios is the #1 place to go, and she will help you through all of the process. She's posted the email in the Slack, in the live chat channel, but you can also complete the form on our website, send us an email, direct message, the digital currency program on Twitter. Oh, excellent point. Someone said I should mention the scholarship opportunities. We have an extensive set of scholarship opportunities for students enrolled in this program. George, can you post the link to the scholarships? The link is, we'll show you the different types. There are scholarships for academic merit. There are scholarships for financial need. There are scholarships from people from least developed countries as defined by the World Bank. There are scholarships for people who have made exceptional contributions in this field. There are scholarships for people who will be doing some type of a work study and helping us with the administration of the program. The scholarships vary. Some of them are in the 10, 20, 30% range. There's a handful of exceptional ones that can go up to 100% for exceptional circumstances. We have a Syrian refugee on the program who is one of our full scholars, and we're very impressed with his work. But if you looked at the scholarship link and you think some of those might be applicable for you, absolutely make an application. The committee meets every week or two. They They look at all the different factors and they'll make a determination on if you're eligible for a scholarship and if you're eligible for what amount. So if you look at the criteria and think you might meet them, please do apply. We certainly want to help make it as economically viable for people, depending on their circumstances, as possible. Irini has also pointed out that that's interesting. This is new this time. I believe I knew this and I forgot this, and I'm remembering it again. The top 15 grades in the MOOC examinations will have a 25% scholarship for the program. Well, that's exciting. I should try and. Do I get to take the final examination? I think that's unfair competition. So I think, and I see a question about back the topic of today. Very quickly, I think it's going to depend on many factors if areas of the developing world, primarily if it can be made into a simple form factor for consumers. But I don't want to get back into those answers because I think we're wrapping up the session. So once again, let me thank you for joining us with this MOOC. If it wasn't for you, there wouldn't be a MOOC. If it wasn't for you and folks like you, there wouldn't be an academic program, and then our lives would be much less interesting. I want to encourage you to stay close to the University of Nicosia and this team, regardless of if you're involved later in the program. We are working on some mechanisms for how that can work, but we have had thousands of students go through the MOOC, some of the most interesting people in the space. We'd love to keep this community together for whatever reason, to exchange ideas, to kick around concepts, to help promote this as an academic and business topic area. And this is something we'd like to encourage you to stay together, and we'll try and roll out some things over this year that might help us do this. I'd also like to thank my co-instructor, Andreas Andonopoulos, who has been critical in this MOOC. I have to thank George Babayuriu, who keeps the ships running, the trains running and the ships floating, and generally the whole academic administration of the MOOC and some other courses going well. And he's very, very knowledgeable about cryptocurrency. And he's also now making nerdy jokes in the comments, which I'm not going to repeat. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, team. Thank you very much, students. I hope to see some of you in New York, and I hope to see some of you in our classes. Have a great evening. Good luck in the final, and good luck with everything.